We'll give a short history lesson. The near history is that in 2004, this fellow in the black shirt, Be Free, Mike Mish, was the last one to leave regular flying here when the third hangar fell on his ultralight. He'll be glad to tell you that story. And then nobody did anything until 2017. I cut down a couple trees and flew this in 2018 briefly. And then in 2019 I was based here in this airplane. This is my airplane. I have a hoop building down there you'll see as you leave, driving out to the north to Minor Park Road. And then this summer I've been based here too and wanted to give lots of people rides and stuff, but then there's this bug going around, so I just haven't been sharing my cockpit much. So that's the recent history. What I don't know anything about really is the 1990 to 2004 period. Now, Mike was killing the weeds, and a lot of the trees I've cut down that were really near the runway, you could count the rings on them and they were exactly 40 years old. So I know when the last oak trees were cut down near the runway, it was 40 years ago. And if you look on Google Earth, those of you who are aficionados of Google Earth, there is a Wayback dial on the top of Google Earth, and you can look at previous images, and you can look back at different years that there were images and see just what condition was what. Recently I posted, show me your hands if you have seen the Facebook site for this airport, Ottiger Field, since 1950. Okay, about 5 of you. I've posted videos of what was the central hangar here, that pad where we have some tables set up, how it deteriorated over the years, including the last event was a bonfire right here in this ash pit where we burned everything that was left. It was a mess. Now Mike has embraced the south hangar and made it newish again. He's done a lovely job, and he will put his airplane in it in the spring after he finishes building it. And I'm using a hoop tent with vinyl pool covers over it to protect my airplane from hail and sticks and bird poop and stuff. But I don't leave it there in winter. There were some newspaper stories in the 80s about the flying club that was based here. There were 11 to 20 members. They regularly were doing lessons and getting their different piloting lessons and ratings. Private pilot, commercial pilot. This is not an airport on which you would do any instrument work because there's no radio beacon. So when we came in 2017, there were trees right up to the runway, and the runway was covered with sod, and Mark brought his tractor. Mark is the 140 owner and pilot. He's based up at Shelby, Oceana County Airport up in Shelby. And he scraped up some of the sod. And Mike has been a religious weed poisoner, and that's been critical for getting all the stuff off the runway. So the ancient history of this airport is that, as I read it from stories in old newspapers, which you can all see on the White Lake area newspaper archive, digitally searchable, was that Fred Ottiger took lessons up in Rothbury, and he had 3 instructors in one airplane, and after they crashed it the 3rd time, their wives told him no more airplane. So Fred Ottiger could not learn to fly in Rothbury anymore, so he said, well, I have a farm, and he said, I cut myself a runway and started to fly out of this place right here. His house, by the way, was towards the road. I don't know if you saw the sign that said Fred's house. It was crushed by trees sometimes after he died in 73, and it was just a mess, and it's still a mess, but at least it's a flat mess because I thought it was dangerous the way it was with the trees leaning on it. So I flattened it anyway. And it's just another project to address. So we had one fatal accident here in 1963, I think it was, Ian Krause, and and that happened up at the north end, and she landed, she got caught on the wire, and she was just too close to the ground too soon. And then in 1964, in a ceremony, they had a couple-hour ceremony where they had skydivers, and the city officials came out and feted Fred Ottiger for doing this all on his own. The actual biography of Fred is kind of thin. I don't know that much about it. He joined the Army in 1917, the end of the First World War, the Great War, the war to end all wars. You remember that? And then he came back and went to work at the tannery for the rest of his working career, and he made this his full love. He was a bachelor, and making this airport work was his life. In the 70s, the 60s and 70s were kind of a heyday for general aviation. The interstate highway wasn't done yet, and cars weren't air-conditioned as much, and people would buy and fly little airplanes to get where they wanted to go because it was cooler and fast. I mean, physically cooler as well as kind of neat. And there was also a lot of romance involved with flying still as a carryover from propeller airplanes in the Second World War and the First World War. When flying was thought to be cool, we didn't have spacemen yet. And then the oil embargo in '73 made it really expensive to fly, and people stopped flying so much. The price of gasoline. And then the highways got better, and the cars got better. And people didn't think anything of jumping in their car for 6 hours to go 2 or 3 states away because it was a nice ride and it's smooth, and they weren't bouncing around on 2-lane roads. So the attraction of flying yourself in an airplane was a much higher threshold, and then dropped off. Today we're hobbyists, much like horse people, and then you know, you don't have a horse to do much work these days. You have a horse because you want to have a horse. And we who have little airplanes want to have little airplanes and go flying. They're great for transportation. We do use them for transportation. But if we want to go real far, we take a jetliner too because it's cheap and easy. So the flying club worked here in the 70s and 80s, and hobbyists improved their skills, got their licenses. I think at the heyday there were 6 or 7 airplanes based here, and there were also dozens and dozens of weekend flyers during the summer. Vacationers would come up from Grand Rapids or other places, and so this was a very popular place on summer evenings, on Fridays and Sundays when they left again. And Fred said in 63 or 64 that he had 200 airplanes the year before, and another article said that he had 300 in one summer. So that was, I don't know if that was 300 different airplanes or 300 movements of airplanes, or it could be 150 airplanes that landed and then took off again. I don't know. There were no logbooks or anything other than a few collections of photographs that have been sent to the Montague Museum, and I've scanned them and I've added them to the Facebook page. I did not intend to become the historian. I just wanted to run here to have the airport to fly off of. But it turns out that being the guy who's saying, "Come fly off my airport," I also get a lot of historical input. Now, the airport is actually owned by a trust in Florida. They would like to sell it to a club of pilots who would like to maintain it and maintain flying. It is zoned airport by the Montague Township. The FAA has approved our use of the airspace above as no conflict, and the state of Michigan has very little concern for private airfields. If we were to become what's called public use, then they would be measuring how clear the area is on either side of the runway, and how far the markings are, and this and that and so on. It would be kind of fun for more people if we could become public use to at least do some flight instruction for young people That'd be all right. We wouldn't have, big business here, and we wouldn't have big airplanes here. We're restricted on either end by tall trees. We love our trees in this part of Michigan, but there they are, and they're not going anywhere. So we have to fly carefully to use the middle and end of the far runway. Airplanes land and take off into the wind so that their ground speed is less. Those of you who boat, kayak on the river, you understand that there's a current of air, and you want to land with as slow a ground speed as possible, so you head into the current of air to land and to take off both. So this runway has two names. It's named 17 if you are heading 170 degrees, which would be southward, and it's named 35, the same pavement, if you're heading northwards, 350 degrees. So those of you who've been here a while have seen a wonderful remote control act by Thomas Stallwitz. Is that right, Stallwitz?
Yes.
Thomas? Okay. Thomas is a recent immigrant to Whitehall. His wife was from the neighborhood?
No.
No? Well, okay. Anyway, he's here now. He's from Germany. He knows his models. He's also, by the way, a crash hot 3D modeler and 3D printing guru. And that comes in handy when you have model airplanes and other things to do. We started with the Port City RCers, the Remote Control Club of Muskegon, and the EAA 578 578 chapter of Fremont to do what is called a Build and Fly program at Montague schools. And we got going building model airplanes. The students were flying small electric models in the gymnasium at Montague school, middle school, and they were putting together a larger model, and then this virus came and got let out, and we didn't finish that yet, so maybe we'll get it back together this fall and get that flying out of doors. But it's an electric model. Some of you who remember modeling 40 and 50 years ago, it was loud and there was gasoline and spark plugs and stuff. And are we all electric today? No, the big airplane is gasoline. Okay. His large model here is gasoline. But this is a great way for young people to learn about aerobatics or even all aviation and get a sense of how an airplane is made and maybe learn skills that they can use after schooling to do more.
Yep. Tell me about the summer camp.
Oh, sure. That's something we're very proud of. Mark reminds me that last summer we organized a day camp with the school system of Muskegon, right? It was Greater Muskegon, and we had 26 kids, or about 26 kids, at the Muskegon Airport Terminal building in what used to be the restaurant. We had workshops there. We had metalworking, we had carbon propeller, we had a couple other things. And we also toured all the different parts of the airport. And at the end of the 4 days, we gave them all individual rides in our little airplane, which was pretty thrilling for them and pretty thrilling for us. And there's a short video on the Facebook page of 3 of the students I took up, or 2 I guess, and then I had a videographer in the back seat. But so that was cool, and we were all on calendar to do that again this year last week, but we didn't. So the school system is recognizing that there are times when the aviation and tourism business is huge. This isn't one of those times by a few months, but there are lots of jobs in aviation in terms of maintaining airplanes, flying them, hostessing them, or hosting them, so on. It's a giant industry. and an opportunity for a lot of young people, and not necessarily requiring higher schooling either to get in and start turning wrenches. A lot of technical training that is not necessarily university.
Who is the group that owns it?
Okay, so who owns it now? From what I've been able to tell, because I'm in touch with the current trustee of the trust that owns it, what happened was Fred Ottiger wrote in his will that he would give it to Francis Wohler. Francis Wohler was a very busy guy in local government, as far as the newspaper tells me, because when I do a digital search on Francis Wohler, it's like 7,000 hits. So he was in every issue. And so when he inherited it, 3 years later, he sold it to a man in Florida on a land contract, is the rumor. And then he built a house, and then he divorced his wife, and she kept the house and the well, the water well, and they split that 4.6 acres off from this property, which was owned by a Jim Gillespie of Florida.
So what's the acreage?
So this is 55 acres, this is, or 52 acres I think, his is 5, and then there's a 10-acre lot on that corner, and a 15-acre lot on that side that are both owned by a Ms. Longnecker of Texas. She owns either side, and she grew up in the farm that was there. And so those are zoned airport also, so there are 4 properties zoned airport. So this property owned by Mr. Gillespie, he didn't seem to care much about doing anything other than just paying the taxes and having it here and trusting other people to use it as an airport. Mike, did you ever actually talk to him? Okay.
No, I did everything through Francis Waller.
Okay, everything through Francis Waller. So then Francis Waller died, and he was listed as the manager for a very long time, but whenever I wanted to fly in the mid-90s, I could never reach him. I don't know now, looking back, was he already dead or then, I don't know, mid-90s. So then Mr. Gillespie Sr. died 2 years ago. I had made an appointment to see him in Florida when I was down there on business. I actually met his son, who was also named Jim Gillespie, so it's Jim Gillespie II. Not our Jim Gillespie. Not our Jim Gillespie from out in Stillman Beach. So when Senior died, it passed to his wife, and his wife is not managing her estate, her son, Jim Gillespie II. And I'd already met and talked to about doing something here, and he was keen to do something, and so he wants me to find a club of guys to buy it and run it as an airport, so that's cool. Here we have Montague Township full of open fields, but the airport is in an oak forest. Right. Go figure, you know.
So back in the late 60s, and I can remember this, my friend David lived over in Ionia, and I had just come here to set up my pottery studio. And he had a pilot's license, and he just rented an airplane. And he'd fly over, and we knew about the airport. And so he'd call me, and I'd know about when he was coming, and I'd come over here, and he'd come and land. Well, one day, he was bringing me home, and in the winter, and we landed across fields, and then across the fence, and the trees were much lower back in the late 60s.
About 50 years lower.
Yeah,
60 years
yeah.
lower. Yeah.
I mean, it was really, but the problem was, you know, there's a little wind, crosswind. You don't have a lot of choices. And it was plowed, and the snow was about that much. And the guy had plowed it out, just 2 passes. And we had to land. Dave was really good. He actually got it in. The wings went on lot of people flew in here. And there was, you know, things, there was even a fuel tank up in the air. We never bought fuel here because Dave always would buy it in Ionia and come over and then back. So that's my story.
And you're sticking to it.
I'm sticking to it.
Don't embarrass us.
No, just a quickie here. You can't see very well, but there's a runway that goes down there in the woods, way back down there. How many of us have seen Star Wars? Well, I used to love coming in for a landing down there because it was kind of like those TIE fighters going down in those things chasing each other. You fly down through that woods, you don't have a whole lot of clearance on each side for your wings.
Jeff, is that paved?
Of taking your life in your hands to kill the Death Star.
Jeff, is that paved, that other ink?
That was paved, it is paved, but it's all grown.
Roger's asking about the condition of the other, the cross runway, and the condition is we're letting the sod hold it together. we haven't like cored the asphalt or anything. There is some asphalt down in there, but the sod seems to hold it together. So I've actually marked it as closed because airplanes like mine need a little more runway than that. It would have to be a 40-knot wind for me to land on this crosswind now, because the far end that used to show on the charts was never actually zoned airport and never actually owned by the guys who had the runway here. They just said, we need more runway, let's extend the runway. And they did without, as far as I know, any permission or anything. Cut the trees down, extended the pavement. So, and they used it for years that way. So I, with my airplane being heavier and faster, I should say not slow enough for a short runway, I use the long paved runway. Any other questions or stories?
I have a little story.
Roger volunteered a little story.
My story is that actually I did a shift at the Montague Museum last Saturday. When you do a shift at the Montague Museum, you always sort of snoop around. And I was going through some files, some folders to get that Nancy Fleming room. And there was a picture of Fred Ottiger. And so if you want to see what he looked like when he was standing there. Anyway, I lived in Mill Valley for California for a long time, and I got a phone call one time after I moved back here from the people who were, the couple who were renting the house in Mill Valley, and so they said, what are you doing Tuesday night? And I said, I'll be home. And so they said, okay. They said, and Peter, people who follow Aviation Magazine and things like that, this guy's name is Peter Diane. And,
wow, Peter Lurt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, wow.
Okay, wow, Peter Lurt. Anyway, Peter Lurt, Diane, they lived in the house about 6 years. Anyway, he said, actually he wrote for Aviation Magazine, and then also the things that he would do is that he would, Mr. Rick wanted a plane from Santa Barbara, Peter would go to Milan to pick it up, somehow fly it back, and that sort of thing. And so they called and they said, what are you doing Tuesday night, as I mentioned? And I said, I'll be home. And they said, where should we land? There's Muskegon County Airport and Ottiger. And all I remember that my parents were friends of Rudy and Ann Klaus. And that Ann sort of bit the dust at the other end of the road, right here kind of thing. So I told Peter, I said, I think you better land in Muskegon. They were ferrying a plane back to Nantucket.
Peter Lurt was a regular columnist in, I'm not sure which magazine now, but magazine. Is this on still? Yep, that's okay. So he built some record-setting long distance small airplanes. Really? Two-seater, I think. Monmouth was his. And
He had a 150 that he flew.
and a one. Okay. So if you're ferrying a Gulfstream jet or even a Cessna 414, which is like a 9-seater twin, you're not coming into Ottiger because it needs more runway, it needs more clear space to get all that airplane accelerated to flying speed. It has plenty of power, and maybe if it was really light, like 2 people in a 9-place airplane with really big engines, you could get in and get out just fine. But if you got 9 people in it, it won't get in and out. Now, I have posted on the Facebook page some pictures of big twins that came in here in the 60s by business people that were selling school buses or vans, work vans, and also 2 businesses came to visit the leather works, the cannery, and it was a Beech B-18, which is a pretty big airplane. It seats, I think, 9, has 2 radial engines. It looks like a DC-3, but it's significantly smaller than a DC-3. And it has pictures of it parked right there. Well, when they came in, there were no trees to the south, and they didn't have to dip down over obstacles the way we do today. So you won't see airplanes like that coming through.
Sky King had one.
Sky King had, his was a 310, I think, the Songbird 2, if you must know. I don't know what a Songbird was. The fatal accident on this airport was in 1963, I believe, Ann Klaus. The story I've read in the old newspapers is that she was, I think, an advanced student of private pilot. I'm not sure she was actually holding her private pilot's license. She and her husband had flown down to get another airplane. So evidently the 2 of them had gone to pick up an airplane. He was in a second airplane. She came back first. She landed too close to the end of the runway and got caught on the wires. As a pilot, I'm wondering why she was that low, that close, because there's a long runway here, but I've also, as a student pilot, got into some things that where the margin wasn't so great, so she just got low on her margin and got caught on the wires. The airplane slammed down, and she was probably killed instantly. I think she was killed instantly. Unfortunately for the bird, of course, she died, but also her husband wasn't far behind, and he landed over the wreckage and met the emergency people after it got all around. There was also some sort of gyrocopter accident in the woods sometime.
Way down at the end of that.
Okay, way down that way?
Yeah, the engine failure couldn't make it back to
Okay, and that was a fatal too. I don't consider that an airport accident in terms of he had an engine failure near the airport, but it wasn't related to the airport. Roger has asked me to explain why we're doing this on this Thursday night, and the reason is I was invited to give this talk, basically, by the Historical Society for this summer, but then they canceled all their meetings. But I said, well, it's a lot of open air, and I'm not too worried about COVID because we're not right in our faces and yelling at each other. I'm yelling at you through electronics, so that's, I don't think the COVID can get through the electronics. And it's a beautiful evening, and maybe school will start, and maybe other things will happen. And is the place gorgeous? No, but it's sure a lot better than it's been for years. So we're proud to share it, and I'm anxious to also meet other pilots that might be interested in using it and maybe helping out too, because there's lots of work to be done. But it's usable and safe now. It's good if you practice on a bigger airfield, on a tiny part of it, and get used to flying tightly between trees. And the wind, which kind of curls over the trees and so on. So we have one of our first projects is to fix the windsock, because the windsock favors, well, we got enough wind that it's working correctly, but it often just looks like that even when the wind's from some other direction. We got to fix that. It kind of bends over.
At Fred's house, well, there's nothing left. It's just a pile of rubble there too. There's a little shed about this big, kind of leaned over, but his house was right there. He lived in that little bitty house, and he spent every penny that he had to make this airport. When they came to pave the runways, now this runway is a half mile long, There's another one crossways that goes back into the woods there, and that one wasn't quite as long. He paid to have those 2 runways paved with cash.
Oh, wow.
He'd
That's
saved
expensive.
Yep, he saved all of his money, and he used to be a gas pump right over there, and whenever an airplane would come in, Fred would go over and stand by the gas pump and hope that somebody needed gas. The airport actually belongs to a fella in Florida. Actually, it belongs to an estate, because Mr. Gillespie, who owned it, passed away and left it to his children in the estate. And the estate wants to stay airport, but they want to sell it. And so what they're hoping right now is that we can get enough people to start flying here again, to put together maybe a flying club or something like that, and then buy the property.
Okay, he's not coming back. So anybody who wants to drive out, you can go out that way, but please stay to the left in case an airplane were to show up. You can hit the runway.